I found out what my parents were willing to do to me at 5:47 on a Wednesday morning with a phone in one hand and a cold cup of yesterday's coffee in the other. The banking app loaded, and a band of red dropped across the screen like a gate coming down. Access denied. Account restricted. My grandfather's trust. $520,000, and I couldn't see a cent of it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we sit with the quiet women who get underestimated and watch what happens when they stop explaining themselves and let the facts speak. If a story like this has ever lived in your own family, you already know the feeling in your chest right now. I called my mother first. My father took the phone, soft as a Sunday sermon. "We had to step in," he said. "Family comes first." My mother's voice came from somewhere too close behind him. "You're not thinking clearly. Let us manage it." I didn't argue. I said, "Okay," hung up, took a screenshot of the red line, wrote down the time, and put on my blazer. "I'm April Anley. I'm 34. I live alone on the north side of Linwood, Ohio, and I'm a forensic accountant. I read numbers other people are trying to hide. My family thought I made spreadsheets. My mother once told a neighbor I worked in billing. I let them believe it, because it seemed harmless. The way a small misunderstanding seems harmless, right up until the day you need someone to know exactly who you are. The money came from my grandfather, Walt. He farmed 40 acres east of town most of his life, and when his knees gave out, he sold the land and put the bulk of it into a trust at Linwood County Savings, naming me, alone, as beneficiary. The family's theory was that I'd been the favorite. The truth was plainer. I was the one who stayed. I drove him to appointments, learned his medications, slept in the chair by his bed his last 3 nights. His lawyer, a careful man named Ed Keller, told me once the trust was watertight. 2 weeks before he died, Walt gave me his pocket watch, heavy brass, running 2 minutes slow. "A slow clock is still honest," he told me. "It's not lying to you. A liar will change the number, but he'll forget to change the time. People always forget the time." I didn't understand him then. I do now. A month before the red line, we'd had Sunday dinner at my parents' house, the one that always smells of lemon polish. My mother set down her glass mid-meal and said, "The way you say a thing you've already decided is true, that my grandfather had always played favorites with that will." My father said nothing, eyes on the table, and slid an envelope with a Navy Bank logo under a catalog before I could really see it. I noticed. Noticing is what I do. I didn't think much of it. Days later, my sister Renee, who handles title and escrow paperwork 2 towns over and never visits my office, showed up with coffee she knew I wouldn't drink. She asked, casually, which bank held Grandpa's trust and whether anyone else had access to my account in case something happened to me. She mentioned a notary she knew, a man named Hal, fast and cheap and good with family. I said I'd think about it. I told myself I'd lock down my account that weekend. I didn't get there in time. So, that Wednesday, I drove to the bank instead. The manager, Carol Vance, pulled up a document I'd never seen, a power of attorney, my name at the top, granting my father authority over my accounts. My signature forged at the bottom, notarized by Hal Bruner, dated 3 weeks earlier. Carol clicked into the file's properties, the part of a document most people never look at, and went quiet. The file had been created 4 days ago. Not 3 weeks. 4 days. A careful woman going silent is never nothing. It's the loudest sound there is. She told me the account would now stay frozen as part of a fraud review, a very different kind of frozen, one that protected me instead of them. I didn't cry in the car. What came instead was the cold, narrow focus I get when a file finally cracks open. At home, I laid the forged page beside Walt's old trust papers and an old birthday card I'd signed years back. My real signatures all lean the same wrong way. This one sat flat and careful, traced from something. And I remembered. 2 months earlier, Renee had borrowed a stack of family papers to scan for an album nobody ever mentioned again. One of those papers had my clean signature on it. Easy to trace on a light box. The kind a title office keeps in the back room. I called Ed Keller and read him the document over the phone. "A forged power of attorney is presumptively void," he said, "and even a real one could never reach into an irrevocable trust, naming only me. which raised the real question. If the forgery could never legally hold, why build it at all? The answer was uglier and simpler. They hadn't built it to win in court. They'd built it to win in my kitchen at 5:47 inches the morning. Before I was awake enough to think straight, freeze the account, call me unstable, and offer to fix the very mess they'd made, if only I'd sign the real papers and hand them the keys for good. The forgery wasn't the robbery. It was the crowbar. Renee called that evening, warm and worried, reading from a script she thought was Invisible Times. Nobody thinks you did anything wrong. You've just never been good with the money side. I let her talk. People filling a silence hand you things they didn't mean to. And then she did. The paperwork is already filed. You'd just be making it official. She'd just told me, without meaning to, that she already knew the document existed. That night, I held the watch under the lamp. 2 minutes slow, same as always. They'd changed the number, I thought. They'd changed my signature, the date, the story about my mind. But somewhere in the bones of that document, there was a timestamp nobody had thought to touch. I decided I wasn't going to shout my way out of this. I was going to let the time speak. My Aunt Marie called 2 days later, gentle and careful. The way you talk to someone you've been told is fragile, wondering if I was sleeping, mentioning that everyone understood grief, did strange things, that nobody would judge me for needing help. My mother had been calling the whole family, worrying about me out loud until the worry hardened into fact. I didn't defend myself. I just asked my aunt one question. Had my mother said any of this before or after the account was frozen? There was a pause. She hadn't even known about the account. Now she was thinking. I went looking for the why, because it's usually sitting in public record waiting for someone bored enough to read it. My father had taken out a business loan 4 years back to keep his equipment dealership alive after a big chain opened on the highway. The dealership hadn't survived. The loan had. There was a lien on the house, the one that still smells of lemon polish, and the lender was starting the slow legal walk toward calling the debt due. The number he owed sat close enough to the number in my grandfather's trust that the two figures looked at each other like a lock and a key. Family first, he'd said. He'd meant the debt. He'd meant the house. He'd meant the only money in reach, with a soft enough guard on it. My mother called again, honey-voiced, suggesting we all sit down like adults, Sunday dinner, the whole family, cousins included. I knew exactly what the table was for. It wasn't to work things out. It was a stage, and she wanted witnesses to my unraveling. So I decided to give her witnesses, and let me be the one deciding what they watched. The good plates were out. My mother gave a soft speech about love and grief and stepping in. Renee laid a stack of management papers in front of my empty seat, a pen uncapped on top. The whole table waited for tears or an outburst. I left the pen exactly where it lay. Before I sign anything, I said, I think everyone here should know what the bank already knows. I told them, plainly. A power of attorney with my forged signature had been submitted 4 days before my account was frozen, dated to look 3 weeks old, notarized by a man named Hal Bruner. My mother's composure cracked. You see how she is, she said, too fast, too loud. But it didn't land the way it had on the phone for 2 weeks. My father's face went pale. So did Renee's. Danny, my brother, looked at our parents like he'd never seen them before. I drove home in the dark while my phone lit up with calls I didn't answer. Marie, Danny, my mother twice, Renee, and one number with no name that rang once and stopped. The way a call stops when someone loses their nerve. By the end of the week, the story had flipped. I'd forged the document myself, for some tax scheme, and was now panicking and pointing at my own family. Renee had gotten Hal to hold the line he'd swear, journal and all, that I'd signed in front of him 3 weeks earlier. A story with a witness is heavier than a story without one. They came for my work next. My boss, Pewitt, closed her office door, something she never does, and told me an anonymous complaint had accused me of using my professional access to intimidate my own family. None of it was true. It didn't have to be. It only had to be plausible, and right now, it was. She asked me to step back from anything touching the matter while the firm decided how to handle it. They'd reached past the money. They were reaching for the one identity I'd built without any of them. Danny asked to meet at a diner on neutral ground. He looked terrible. I don't want this to be true, he said. She's our mother. I didn't argue with feelings. Feelings were the other side's home field. I just slid across the table the printed page of the file's true creation date, 4 days before the freeze, and let him read it himself. "If this date is real," he said slowly, "then somebody in my family is lying to my face." He folded the page along my creases and kept it instead of handing it back. That told me which way he'd started to lean. Then the bank's investigator, Reyes, called with the part I didn't want to hear. Hal Bruner had produced his notary journal, a line dated 3 weeks back, my name written in, a check mark beside it, matching the document's face perfectly. As long as he swore to it, the case was one person's word against another's, and a frozen account, a worried family, and a notary with a logbook didn't obviously point my way. I sat with that for one long, cold night. Then I remembered, a journal is just ink. A man can write any date he likes after the fact. But there were 2 things he couldn't write his way around. The file's real creation time, stamped into its bones by a computer that doesn't care what anyone swears. And a notary's authority isn't a stamp, it's a license. Public, with dates, and licenses expire. I looked it up. Hal Bruner's commission had lapsed in March. No renewal on file. The power of attorney was notarized in May. On the day he swore, he watched me sign. He had no authority to notarize anything at all. And when Reyes pulled the full journal, the entry numbers skipped my line wedged in out of sequence, pretending to be older than it was. I called Ed Keller and told him it was time to put everyone in one room, not at my mother's table this time, but his, on his letterhead, so no one could mistake it for another dinner they could talk their way through. I asked Danny to come and sit on my side. He said yes without hesitating. They arrived at an office that didn't smell like lemon polish, and I think that alone unsettled them. My mother went on the offensive before she even sat down. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. Renee came in bright and certain with a folder of her own. Hal sat near the door, sweating, like a man who wanted to be close to the exit. Danny sat beside me without a word, and I watched my mother register exactly what that meant. I let her talk until she ran out of breath. Then I opened my folder and laid it out, page by page, flat-voiced. The power of attorney claiming a signature from 3 weeks back. The file's own record showing it was created 4 days before the freeze, with no older history behind it. The Secretary of State's confirmation that Hal Bruner's notary commission had expired in March, months before he supposedly watched me sign. "You cannot notarize a document with authority you no longer have," I said. Hal broke first. "Renee told me it was just family paperwork," he said. "To no one and everyone." She said April already agreed. I didn't know it was. He never finished the sentence, because there was no ending that helped him. My father put his face in his hands. "I'm going to lose the house," he said quietly, not a defense, just the true thing he'd been carrying. My mother stood, voice cracking high. "You would do this to your own family?" I didn't raise mine to meet her. "I find fraud for a living," I said. "I found yours," Danny said, beside me, steady. "Mom, the date is the date." She had no answer for that. No one ever does. Reyes confirmed the bank would lift the restriction and refer the forged power of attorney and the notarization to the county prosecutor. Ed Keller put it plainly for the family. The power of attorney was presumptively void. The trust had never been theirs to manage, frozen or not. My mother looked at the door. Hal asked, in a small voice, if he needed a lawyer, the closest thing to a confession a quiet room ever hears. The bank lifted the freeze. The money came back under my name, where it had always legally lived, and I didn't touch a dollar of it, because it had never really been about the dollars. The prosecutor's review opened. These things moved slowly. Hal's commission troubles became his own quiet ruin. Renee was put on leave. A title company can't keep an employee sitting inside a fraud referral, and the marriage and mortgage she'd been trying so hard to save got harder to save by her own hand. My parents still owed what they owed. The lien didn't lift just because the plan failed. That was the saddest part. They'd risked everything on taking something that was never going to be theirs, and came out the other side with the same debt and a family that finally knew exactly what they'd done. Danny calls me every Sunday now. We don't talk about any of it. We just watch a ball game and let the quiet be ordinary. My mother called once more, about a month later. She didn't apologize. She never has. Not once in my hearing. She just tried the old key and the old lock. You never think about this family, she said. You only think about yourself. I looked out at my driveway, the one that floods every spring, and I wasn't angry. I thought about this family the whole time, I said. That's why I let the truth come out instead of burying it to keep the peace. She started toward the same old line that I wasn't thinking clearly, and I stopped her gently. You told me I wasn't thinking clearly, I said. It turns out clear is the only thing I've ever been. Then I told her I loved her, because it was true, and because it changed nothing, and I said goodbye, and I let the line stay quiet. That night I sat at the same counter where the red line had found me, and laid my grandfather's watch flat in my palm. 2 minutes slow, the way it's always been, the way it always will be. I used to think the slowness was what was wrong with it. I understand it now. The world is full of people who'll change the number, the signature, the story, the date on the page, whatever it takes to make a lie, sit still long enough to fool you. But underneath all of it, there's always a clock somewhere they forgot to touch. A true time, stamped into the bones of the thing, patient and a little behind, and utterly unable to lie. I wound it once, not to make it right, just to keep it moving. If this reminded you to check who has access to your accounts, or to trust the quiet voice telling you something's off, take it as your sign, and do it this week. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one.